Luck at the job interview.
All right, well, it is 7:02. Why don't we get started? Because all the committee members are here. Welcome everyone to the May PZT committee meeting. Two issues to discuss today. One is ANC 1C's response to the DDOT Move DC plan. And the other part is consideration of ANC 1C budget priorities that include PZT jurisdiction matters. Why don't we start? Sorry. Why don't we start by looking at this resolution? Let's see. So this is a resolution that I wrote while reading through the Move DC plan. The Move DC plan is a very long policy and strategy document that includes 18 different policy goals, and I believe it's 57 strategies under those policy goals. I tried to focus our efforts on issues that have been raised by this ANC prior, and that is mostly on Vision Zero type priorities of both lowering the speed of vehicles and making the streets safer for those who are outside of vehicles, namely pedestrians, people on bikes and scooters, as well as meeting, as we have previously talked about, as well as those goals that meet the city's stated objective of reducing single occupancy vehicle traffic in the city and focusing on moving people to other modes of transportation when possible, especially transit, and of course, walking and bicycling or other micromobility. The way that I wrote this resolution was by laying out in the whereas clauses primarily full quotes out of the Move DC plan or draft plan, and our resolves are the comments on those. Committee members, you'll see there are times that I say that I want us to say, this is great, or do more of this, or do this faster. I think I know I didn't give a ton of time in advance for you to look at this document, but before as an alternative to me just going through all of the resolve clauses, I think if there are comments or questions from committee members and commissioners, that would be great. So are there any?
I think it'd be helpful for you to go through it, at least for me, because I haven't had the time to do that.
No, I appreciate that. I think what I will do is, it's actually almost easier to read through the document looking at both the whereas clause and the resolved at the same time. So in the in the beginning of the resolution, I note that and I'm actually very pleased with this. So originally Move DC and DDOT did not lay out any guidelines for what sorts of bicycle facilities would be put in different locations. So they put this whole map together and said the map is the network of the bicycle priority network, which is on page 2 of the resolution. And they said in the purple dotted lines where there aren't currently infrastructure, there will be infrastructure in the future. And folks like myself said, okay, what kind of infrastructure? And they noted that they wouldn't specify in different locations, different, which facilities would be used. They later followed up and changed in the current draft to actually say what type of bicycle facility would be required or recommended in different locations. And so, for example, they are now finally, DDOT is saying their guideline is that on a minor arterial, which is Columbia Road or Calvert Street, on a minor arterial, when a bicycle facility will be fully protected. And so you'll see that first resolve clause is an endorsement of that guidance for fully protected bike lanes on I specify on Calvert Street and on Columbia Road. And given that, I think it's important that DDOT plan for a protected facility on Calvert Street, as we've already asked for them to plan for one on Columbia Road. Next, so while the bicycle priority network lists specific types of facilities that they will put into specific types of roads, the transit priority network does not. In fact, the Move DC document itself says that the transit priority map, quote, does not specify what treatment will be made on a given street. I don't know why. If they're, if they know there are certain streets that are part of the priority network, they should know and say what types of facilities those will be. So, will it be a bus lane in every instance? Probably not. Should it be a bus lane in many instances? Yes. Why doesn't DDOT say which instances those should be? And that's what the second resolve is saying, is that Move DC and DDOT should specify the recommended treatments for the transit priority network. Move DC.
Is there any guidance from the Federal Highway Administration or like NACTO or anything about that?
So for the bicycle network, there's
yes.
Yeah, I don't. That's a great question, and one that I'm not familiar with. I guess I could certainly look into whether there is guidance, but I'd be open to DDOT itself just laying out what they would do. But I can also look into whether there's I'll look into that. I think there may not be in the same way, because most of the bicycle facility guidance is regarding safety, whereas most of the transit guidance is involving, let's say, the pace at which things move. So it's less about safety and more about throughput of transit. But I can look into that. But again, I guess I would say broadly that resolution is about the actual stating of guidance, because we can't hold DDOT accountable to what they're going to do unless we know in advance what they say they're going to do. The Move DC, so as you can see on pages 2 and 3 of the resolution, I screenshotted the transit, freight, and bicycle priority networks for our neighborhood. And as you'll see, there are a number of corridors and roads on which that are labeled as both or all three priority networks. And in the Move DC plan, DDOT writes, in some cases, certain streets have been identified as priorities for multiple modes. When there are overlaps, the more detailed planning and design process has to be done. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but essentially there needs to be, when they're going to be working in areas that have overlapping priorities, there needs to be a decision reached on how to design around those three priorities. So for example, again, I keep coming back to Columbia Road because it's an easy one to come back to, and one that we've talked about often in this community and on this committee and commission. Columbia Road is a bicycle, transit, and freight priority network, right? That's a 50-foot of right-of-way that is somehow supposed to give priority to all those things at the same time. So my next resolved clause is that in order to get ahead of these overlapping priorities, we request a meeting with the relevant DDOT teams responsible for transit, freight, and bicycle to discuss strategies for implementing the overlapping priority networks. And I lay out the various streets and intersections that that are overlapping. Okay, so those are the broad overarching Move DC issues. Are there questions or comments on those broad ones before getting into specifics? Cool. Okay. So again, as I said, there are 18 different policies, and under those 18 policy areas, there are 57 different strategies for addressing those 18 policy areas. I could break down them all. I could, but I didn't do that math, so I'm not going to. And again, I didn't think it was worth our time to comment on all 57. And again, I sort of picked ones that were, to me, most important to the issues that we have previously raised. The first two resolved clauses go to policy area 6, which is about safety in projects. And this is about incorporating, the policy 6 talks about incorporating complete street principles and expanding automated enforcement over a 3 to 5 year timeline. From my perspective, Mayor Bowser announced a Vision Zero initiative in 2015, and every year since then, there has been an increase in traffic fatalities. I don't understand why it is a 3 to 5 year timeline and not a 1 to 2 year timeline to even have standard operating procedures for something as simple as relevant to Vision Zero as complete streets and automatic traffic enforcement. And so in the next resolves clauses, I recommend that instead of Move DC putting these on a 3 to 5 year timeline, that they be more urgent on a 1 to 2 year timeline. Let's see. Okay, so next in policy area 7 is about designing infrastructure for improving to improve safety for all, focusing on vulnerable roadway users, so pedestrians, people on bicycles, and on scooters. The Move DC strategy talks about, I believe it's the strategy on update, design, and engineering guidelines, and that talks about having a updating their design and engineering manual with a interdisciplinary committee that oversees that update. Given that Move DC has and DDOT have both said that one, they should prioritize vulnerable road users and people who see the road differently, and given that there's a strategic imperative to have more people on the roads who are not in single occupancy vehicles, I think it's important that there be input for this design and engineering manual to people who are using the roads outside of vehicles. I see there's a lot of activity in the chat. Hold on. Let's see. Oh, okay. Thanks, Amir. So that's what the next resolved clause is about having a majority input on that committee from the non-driving community. Also in that same policy segment, for those who are not familiar, DDOT currently designs roads with a national standard, which is called Vehicle Level of Service, or LOS. LOS is a calculation of how quickly vehicles move through a portion of the roadway. Again, that is focused on moving vehicles, not focused on the environment around the streets and the other people on those streets. It's why, for example, the most recent version of New York Avenue at Dave Thomas Circle is still 9 lanes wide, because DDOT is still focusing on moving vehicles coming into the city versus the people who have to cross that 9-lane street. So proactively, DDOT has said, and Move DC has said, that they need to design a policy and methodology to address the quote in this resolve clause, develop and institutionalize policy and methodology to address a multimodal assessment of alternatives in project development, including the development of a bicycle and pedestrian measures of effectiveness. And their purpose for doing this, as written in the policy, is to move away from LOS. And so I think we should endorse that move, because again, it is looking to the streets, to the activity of the streets of people who are not in vehicles. Again, people who are more vulnerable and have to cross those streets or are riding along with vehicles. Talking a lot in this meeting. Okay. I think this is the next resolve is pretty straightforward. Again, one of the I think it's policy number 10. Oh no, sorry, this is still policy 7. Talks about improving safety, and one of the strategies is, quote, improve safety and accessibility of sidewalks and intersections. I think that we support that and support the urgency that Move DC has put to that. Road diets, as was noted in the chat, are the narrowing of roadways, sometimes by widening sidewalks to take away a travel lane, or by adding a bicycle lane or a bus lane, or adding sort of bulb outs at different points in the intersections so that the road doesn't look as wide. So if we, for example, think about Columbia Road coming up from Connecticut Avenue, that you see this big wide roadway and think, oh, I can drive as fast as I want to because it's this big wide roadway. So DDOT, in Move DC, the strategy talks about having road diets, but it does not include a timeline or any sort of annual metrics. In some ways, it's the strategy says we need to identify places for road diets, and I do agree that they do need to identify them. They shouldn't just put them in willy-nilly, but they should certainly have once they do that analysis, there should be a timeline with target metrics for identification. So another under this policy, another one of the other strategies is, quote, make intersections safer for pedestrians. I agree with that. But DDOT writes into its strategy that it will, if the target metric is improving 20 intersections per year. I recognize that DDOT is not superhuman, but there are 7,000, actually that was significantly more, but there are 7,000 intersections in the District of Columbia. I think that, I know that, in fact, given how many outstanding traffic safety assessments we have in our community alone, that we could find that we have already found 20 intersections that require improvements in our ANC, and that's just what we've already submitted. I simply think that if we're serious about actually ending traffic fatalities and traffic violence, that 20 per year is just not going to get us there. So I don't know if someone has a particular if someone wants to say a particular number, I think that I'd be welcome to a particular number. But then again, I don't know what is actually achievable in terms of DDOT contracting and DDOT work. But I think that if we're targeting a goal, that goal shouldn't be as low as 20 a year.
I think maybe some kind of, point. Not every intersection has the same amount of value, so some kind of point system based on usage, maybe population density around the intersection. I could just ramble off a few characteristics that could lend to a point system, but is there such a, how are they planning on, 20 intersections, 7,000, it's over 300 years at that rate. 300 years ago, US wasn't a republic, so hey. But anyways, how do they plan on prioritizing that? Do they go over that?
So that's not noted, and I saw that Gordon wrote in the chat that DDOT said they get about 100 TSA requests per year. Gordon, as far as I saw, there were actually 91 requests just in Ward 1 last year.
I think he says per year per ward. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Then I should have continued reading further. But yes. So right, one way of identifying that I think, unfortunately, how they are identifying them, at least the way that Acting Director Lott and the mayor are speaking, is that when someone is killed at an intersection, and they can bet on more than 20 being killed a year, then that's where they're going to fix. All right, and again, that's not proactive. Right, as Gordon says, again, I don't think that they can do 800 intersections or 800 blocks a year. That's not realistic.
Maybe what we could do is look at the intersections where people have died and look at common characteristics, and then maybe help us out as a proposal for developing that point system. Yeah.
Okay.
That could be very helpful. Yeah.
No, that's a good idea.
And just to clarify that stat, I'm sure that some of those TSA requests are somewhat redundant. So it's not necessarily 800 for 800 different intersections, but that's just the scale.
Yeah, and again, right, that's, and I will get to this. I guess I'll bring it up now. But essentially, there are two overarching things in Move DC that fall from other policy and strategy goals, and that's that we should be encouraging DDOT to use metrics, to have metrics, and to have target goals, both because it makes sense to use data, and DDOT is always talking about data, and so they should be collecting and replying to that. And second, if they have metrics and goals, they might, maybe they're not going to meet every goal every year, but they should be reporting what their goals are and where they reached. And so later on, I do talk about, for example, there's a strategy related to ADA compliance, and they talk about doing assessments of intersections to make sure that they are safe for people with disabilities and people who simply move slower across intersections. Right, that's the sort of data that can be put towards understanding which intersections need to be improved. And again, not all improvements are safety related, sometimes they're access related.
But safety being a priority, number one. Yeah, especially when we have so many deaths on our transportation network.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I will, but I'll take that note and I'll think about the best way to incorporate that, or if you want to think about the best way to incorporate like a point system, should we, I guess, add to that resolved clause about developing a point system?
Yeah, I think before we modify the resolve clause, maybe when you pull up where those intersections, the intersections where fatalities have occurred, then we could just look at it and say, what are the common characteristics? Then
Okay.
let's think about the points clause before the ANC meeting.
Okay.
Still vote on this and then come back to that, knowing that we will collaborate on that.
Okay. That's a good idea. All right. Oh, I guess it was the very next one is right that the move DC is the ADA. So that says the same thing that I just said it was going to say.
I thought you were actually commenting there, but please.
Right, and again, right. So this goes back to the and I later have an overarching resolve clause. It is the second to last resolve clause. It's the nope, sorry, it is the second to last resolve clause, the on the bottom page that says urges move DC to include specific metrics and timelines wherever the document currently does not have metrics, and request annual reporting to show quantitative progress in every single move DC strategy. Right, so that's what this next, like as you can see, several of these resolves are again, I felt that the strategy was important enough to single out the strategy, but there are 57 strategies and not all of them include metrics or targets. And so they certainly all should. Right, the move DC talks about they are going to complete 20 miles, so that's including everything that currently and in the past exists. There will, by the end of fiscal year 22, be 20 miles of protected bicycle lanes in the District of Columbia. They use the phrase by fiscal year 22, but what they always say in every explanation is by the end of fiscal year 2022. But I'm not going to bicker about that. But then in addition to that, like this is helpful, is that every year after starting from the end of FY22, they will install 5 more miles of protected bike facilities. That's awesome. I have found, as someone who rides through all 8 wards of this city, that there are random, 2-block protected bike facilities in the middle of very busy areas that will then all of a sudden dump you out without any protection. And it was like, well, that was great. What just happened? And so I think that, it's not just about the protection, because I think, as we said in our discussion of Columbia Road, you need to start in a protected facility and end in a protected facility. And you don't just, get off a highway onto a gravel path before getting onto another highway in your car. And so this resolved clause calls for a focus on protecting those bike facilities. So almost, I consider it like an ink blot, right? Is that there are currently protected facilities. Instead of continuing to add random pieces in random places, start building out the network you have, right? Connect to facilities that are close to each other, for example. The move DC talks about let me think if I have the exact language. There's in move DC policy 12, it discusses a strategy on developing a regional approach to congestion pricing.
So before we get to that one, I thought we were but I just have a question or a comment about the protected bike facilities.
Yeah,
So, how does DDOT, uh, decide where to place a protected bike lane? No, there's nothing, no transparent, no metrics, nothing that they like
so,
put out there.
so there's guidelines of the type of street on which they would go, which is great,
Which we talked about.
which we talked about.
Yeah.
But as far as I can tell, there's no transparency of when they do things where. Gordon, I know, follows this a lot, so maybe he has some insight, but for the most part, where they are, the 15th Street bike lane being an exception, for the most part, they put facilities where it's low hanging fruit to put facilities.
Right.
That are not in neighborhoods that are going to raise concerns about parking. But people ride bicycles and scooters where residential neighborhoods are and where people park their cars on the street, and not just alongside the Irving Street Highway in front of the hospitals. So I don't know. I mean, I know that in the we previously talked about inviting someone from the bike team to speak to PZT. That's a great question for them, is, how do they choose? Obviously we'd love to work with them to choose our neighborhood sometimes, but understanding what it is that puts networks forward. And I do know that they have that, like the staff on the bicycle team has listened to demands from neighborhoods when there are demands for protected facilities. So for example, the business community in Ivy City demanded in a letter to DDOT that a planned bicycle facility on West Virginia Avenue be implemented this summer as opposed to a year from now, 2 years from now. And so DDOT is going to implement that facility this summer because there was demand from the community. Yeah, I'd love to figure out a way for us to organize to demand things to move more quickly. I'm happy to have that conversation, but I don't even know if that letter moved the needle, other than people who wrote the letter saying that it moved the needle.
Yeah. It's just when you were saying, 2 blocks, you might see a connected bike lane, and then you don't out in the ensuing number of blocks. I wondered if there was any method to that apparent madness.
So the method to that is usually the parking issue. So for example, the Irving Street bicycle track ends at Warder. It wasn't called Move DC. I think it's the We Move DC plan of 2004 called for the Irving Street cycle track to continue all the way to Columbia Heights to 14th Street. DDOT determined that it was too hard. I don't even know if they ever asked, but I think they immediately got questions from the community there and the east side of Columbia Heights, between 4th Street and 14th Street. And so they didn't try to go further, and they simply said, we'll end here in the middle of nowhere and we'll go forward TBD.
Yeah, just Zach, everything you said corroborates what I know. I would say that it's everything where they have wide enough streets, but every decision rule that DDOT has a million counterexamples. For example, they presented the East Capitol bike and safety improvement, where I think a half dozen people have died in traffic crashes the last few years. And 3 of the 4 miles of the project have paint-only bike lanes. And that's because of what Zach mentioned about the vehicle level of service. So something that you guys could do, I guess, is ask them to be more transparent, because to somebody who's not immersed in this, it's completely nonsensical. But all of the planners will tell you, we want a protected, connected network. But in practice, that's not what it is.
I will say I was jumping for joy to learn. So I mentioned earlier the West Virginia Northeast in Ivy City. Again, the businesses called for this, and I think that we can do more to get our business community to come around to the need for bike lanes and for protected bike lanes, because right now our businesses are using bike lanes as loading zones. But it was easy for those businesses in Ivy City to demand that bike lane because it was not taking away parking from those businesses. It was essentially a second travel lane in Ivy City. When this was first proposed, it was similarly to what we're talking about. There's a protected bike lane on Florida Avenue. There was going to be a protected bike lane on West Virginia Avenue from Good Hope, it's not Good Hope, from Mount Olivet, but between Florida Avenue and Mount Olivet, which by Gallaudet University, which for someone like me who is a confident cyclist is not a fun place to bicycle. There was going to be nothing. For reasons that again escaped me, DDOT will be connecting that section this year as part of that project. Again, despite initial opposition, despite it being a one-lane road with parking, they are going to be removing parking and putting in that facility. So that's like another example of transparency, whereas they are doing the right thing, but I don't know why.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's a nice thing to put that into the overarching, one of these overarching clauses, these metrics and transparency.
Mhm.
All right, please. I love the congestion pricing. You're just about to talk about it. And I think that's some of the challenges are just, I think the challenges in the past, right, on any commuter tax has been DC doesn't have representation. And, you know, our surrounding states do. So yeah, I'm not sure, but it should be in there.
Yeah,
and
so-
it might help solve Metro's problems.
So I've not heard it. It could be apocryphal that there's some federal law against DC congestion pricing. I don't know if that's true or not. Let's see what Chris. Yes. So and they're going to be the problem for a lot of things. So anyway, but positively, the plan, because I think that DDOT does want congestion pricing. You know, again, they're just stuck given their surrounding community. So the plan does call for developing a regional approach. So like the DDOT and some policymakers meeting with the MDOT and the VDOT to discuss a regional approach to congestion pricing. But I guess I don't know what a regional approach to congestion pricing means, and it doesn't mention actually doing congestion pricing, right? A regional approach to congestion pricing, as far as someone in Virginia could say, is, well, this Virginia highway, right, Lee Highway has congestion pricing. So folks who are driving from the exurbs of Virginia through the suburbs of Virginia to DC, they are paying a toll, and therefore congestion pricing taken care of.
Well, to me, a regional approach, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind to congestion pricing is to, you know, get all the regional governments on board. Money that comes from the congestion tax goes into something that's used by everyone, naturally, is Metro. Mm-hmm. Right? So, you know, if every regional government is not having to increase the sales tax or plow money into Metro because, you know, everybody's benefiting from the money that's coming from this congestion pricing, that could be a way for other local leaders to get on board with it.
I would be keen to write that there should be, that congestion pricing should go to Metro. I can put that in, but I guess the other question is, Right, so in the language that the plan uses, it doesn't talk about establishing congestion pricing, it just talks about
Yeah.
discussing congestion pricing. So that's why this resolve clause is about actually establishing congestion pricing.
Mhm.
But I will add I'm in the wrong place. I will add an additional resolved clause. What do we want to do? Requests, suggests, recommends.
Yeah, that sounds good. Recommend.
Recommends revenue from regional congestion pricing benefits WMATA.
Yeah, and that's an organization everyone has a stake in, right? Every
Mhm.
local gov.
Well, that's true.
And could be more popular, with taxpayers.
Mhm.
And then increasing the sales tax, get people who
Well,
are,
that's true, yeah, because then you don't need to increase sales tax because, yeah, that's an idea. I like it. Okay, the next strategy or the next policy route is policy 13 regarding the accessibility and efficient delivery of goods and movement of people through curbside management and roadway management, such as different curbside uses to fit different neighborhoods, fairer parking prices responsive to demand, and safe routes for trucks. So in that, I noted, right, so they again, they talk about creating a process. I guess I didn't in the resolve note how long. I believe that was a 3 to 5 year timeline to create a process to implement this curbside management. It seems to me that if they're simply creating a process, that can be done in the 1 to 2 year time frame versus waiting 3 years to create a process. And then again, talking about having actual metrics for curbside management. I know that in our walkthrough with DDOT, we were just discussing how, right, trucks, delivery vehicles, Uber Eats need places to park. No one is questioning that. And they definitely, and DDOT needs to do a better job of managing that, because without better management, all of these individuals are simply just parking wherever they can, which is usually in an illegal and dangerous place. So the sooner that DDOT can create a process, the sooner it can implement that process. And again, it should have target metrics for those processes. Yeah, and that's a whole thing as well, the pickup drop-off zones, because it's a mix between DDOT enforcement and I guess not enforcement, DDOT authority and DPW enforcement. But certainly I've been at Federalist Pig when there's a cop out, like out front waiting for his food, and everyone else is parking in the bike lane. Now, I don't necessarily think that the cop should be involved in ticketing people for parking in bike lanes, but at least he can say, hey, move your car.
would it be, I know I've heard something about DDOT picking up enforcement. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think this is a place for us to chime in on that?
I think that where DDOT should be picking up enforcement is on the automated traffic enforcement. And that, I guess I don't even have a resolution on it, because DDOT, the Move DC plan, is very force forward on that. And as you heard in the mayor's recent announcement, ATE, automatic traffic enforcement, is like the one thing that she's supportive of in Vision Zero. Excuse me. So So I think that when we talk about DDOT enforcement, it's going to be more of an automated enforcement. I don't think that we're going to move necessarily to like traffic cops, but they're DDOT, if you will.
Or moving enforcement from DPW to DDOT.
I haven't heard anything. I guess there are certain maybe things that I haven't heard, but most of what I have heard is about moving enforcement away from police to DDOT, not moving things away from, not moving everything to DDOT. So I think they'll still have DPW responsible for enforcement, but I don't know. Yeah. And I would be happy to, I know that on our walkthrough, I pointed out specific areas in my SMD that we should have ATE. If we want to get in that far into the weeds, again, I think that this being a big strategy document, it maybe isn't the right place to get into the weeds of specifically where to have ATE. I would be happy, especially now that the mayor and the acting director have announced that there's going to be more cameras. We can, in a future meeting, recommend locations, or recommend or that sort of thing.
Yeah. It sounds like it should be for another resolution for sure.
Yeah. And I think it falls into as well, and we'll talk with Commissioner Bowles about his budget letter, because the Vision Zero law does include a significant amount of ATE. And so in order for those to be implemented, there needs to be the money. So we can, that discussion will be in the next section, which we're getting to.
Yeah.
So close to the end here. I like this idea of fair parking prices in response to demand. So again, that establishing fair parking prices is their strategy. I think that we should endorse that strategy, but similarly, I think that it should be on a more urgent timeline. And again, specify, oh, sorry, is that a target? Is that target date? And I wrote data. So let's have a target date for implementation of the new policy.
Are there any details at all about what the fair parking pricing consists of beyond, I assume it's responsive to demand, but is there any additional details, or is it just sort of that general?
That's a great question. Let me quickly open up the policies. Let's see if there's anything written here. That's not right. Okay, so come on. So this strategy says establish fair parking pricing that is responsive to demand on a 3 to 5 year timeline. The bullets are that it will assess where demand-based parking policy will be most effective to balance curbside needs and develop an implementation plan for the new policy. What it means for you, according to the document, is that there will be, it's similar to congestion pricing, there will be higher prices for parking when demand is higher, more availability of parking spaces for those who need the most, and fair pricing for use of public assets. And I don't know if this is related to commercial areas, to residential parking, to both. I do not know, but that's the details that is provided.
Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, and thanks to Kristen for noting that there's pilot parking. Yes, and I know, and again, I don't know if this ever went anywhere, Kristen, but DDOT also had, I think also around the baseball stadium, is they had a curbside management pilot where they were like, where truck delivery companies would reserve a piece of the block for a certain time on a certain day. And it's just like, it is logistics management. If you know that you're going to be just delivering to Mintwood on Mondays at 10, then you book for the 1800 block of Columbia Road on Mondays at 10, and that's when you show up. And you don't just show up whenever, you show up when your time is. Sorry, I'm just frustrated about the trucks that are always parked in front of Mintwood. That's on me. Yeah, so I don't have specific details. If you have ideas that you think should go, Megan, into the into our resolution, I'm happy to say, here are some ideas.
No, I don't have anything specific. I guess similar to some of the other things about more transparency about how they determine things like where to put it, or if, for example, residents asking for it would, for example, I imagine there could be some appetite for something like that in Adams Morgan to lessen the number of people driving to the neighborhood and competing for parking with residents or things like that. But just, I think in all of these, it would be great to have more information from DDOT about how they're making the decisions. And
yeah, so where they note to assess where demand-based parking policy will be most effective, I think we could note, I'm just gonna write this down because I can't think of the language at the moment, but what are the metrics for that assessment? And I can think about how to word that.
Just one thing, you guys mentioned transparency. So DDOT has done the parking pilot, they've done the curb flow PUDO pilot, they're doing the ATE pilot, putting cameras on buses. I don't know if your transparency clause or whatever deals with that, but I would say asking them to be more transparent about all these, releasing data from all of these pilot studies, because they put out a press release, and then it's like the public doesn't have any other information about it for years.
That's an interesting point. Thank you for that. I think, oh, okay. So this is something that we could something that we could add, right? There is a whole section, policy 4 is on data, including tracking the effects of DDOT projects and better and more efficient data management. So in that, I think it would make more sense in commenting on either of those, to ask DDOT to be more transparent with its data, since it is intent on keeping more data. I don't know, commissioners, if you have a thought on that.
I think adding something about transparency about data would be great. I think there, yeah.
Sticks with the theme.
What? Sorry, what was that?
That goes with our theme here.
Yeah, goes with. Okay, I like it. Just what this needs to be, longer. So this is, again, the next resolve, the first one on the final page. There is, I previously noted that there is sort of a hands up what to do about overlapping priority networks. But then there is later down a strategy under policy 13. The strategy is called provide and maintain safe routes for trucks. And in that strategy, the language says, as I know here, transit, bicycle, and other improvements must consider freight accommodations. And I think obviously, again, we need to have freight. That's how the city operates. But I think that there need to be bigger discussions on those overlapping part networks, as opposed to just saying that freight takes priority. And I think certainly in areas like our own, in neighborhoods like our own, we don't need to have 55-foot trailers coming through our neighborhood to deliver to neighborhood shops for the most part, or maybe even at all. And so that's why I talk in this resolve clause about amending the freight plan regarding the dimensions of oversized vehicles. And I think that we should oppose language that says that trucks take precedence over transit and bicycles and other safety improvements. Again, given how we've seen trucks in our own neighborhood roll over safety improvements, or park wherever they can, and since they're big, they can park wherever. I've already noted this resolved clause about specific metrics and timelines. Again, and this is something we've talked about throughout. I think we're all on board with that. And given all of the above and the 4 things we talked about, which were including NACTO guidance for buses, developing points for intersection, metrics for parking, and data transparency, incorporating all of the above, we demand that DDOT commit to its Move DC plan as a strategic guide for all DDOT projects and activities.
What is Move DC if it's not a strategic guide right now?
I think, I guess I would say having a strategic guide and following a strategic guide are 2 different things. So for example, Move DC 2014 says that there should be a protected bike lane, and at a specific facility, not even says there should be a bike facility, there should be a protected bike lane at 2nd and Massachusetts. But there isn't one, and one has never been considered. And a fellow citizen was killed there on a bicycle earlier this year. Move DC 2014 says that Connecticut Avenue from Woodley Park to the border should have a protected bike facility, but DDOT has been debating in public fora for the better part of a year on whether or not to implement a change on Connecticut Avenue that includes bike lanes. And when it's brought to their attention that it is part of Move DC to have a protected bike lane there, they simply say, well, that's just a document. Yes,
yeah, maybe that could use some, I like the demands. Maybe we can just, I think we have the same sentiment, but maybe we can just wordsmith that a little.
Sure.
Yeah.
What what is the?
I'm thinking more, yeah, commit, but implement. It's just something to we can think about how to rewrite that,
Okay.
Or maybe there's in line with the metrics piece, maybe it's something like implement 80% or 90%, of the recommendations in Move DC. That way, they have to actually do things in there and they'll be judged by that. Yeah, that could be good.
So in a way you could say, for example, the one above that says that there should be metrics everywhere, and that we say there should be some level of full percentage of progress every year.
Yeah. Percentage of progress every year would be good, and then an overall number.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I support that. I think the challenge is until there are metrics down, it's hard to specifically give recommendations, right? So if there, Yeah, I guess that's what it is. Without specifics, it's hard to make specific requests. I noticed that
You brought up like second in mass, and I don't know how many specific recommendations were made in the 2014 plan, but if there's 100 of them and they have only done 10,
Hmm.
that's clearly like, why are we even writing up the document then?
Yeah,
Right?
so thanks. And I actually, I noticed that I skipped one of the results. And so I'll mention this in that phrase. I think, so there is a policy shift in the policy document from 2014 to 2021. And, I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about how there was pushback from a large segment of the community, a number of commissioners, because in the 2021 plan, unlike the 2014 plan, there were not specific projects identified. So the 2014 plan identified specific projects that were to be implemented. The current draft plan doesn't identify specific projects. It identifies these 3 networks, and then talks about what's going to happen along all of these networks and along other roads, as opposed to saying specifically there will be this facility here and this facility there. One of the, so DDOT is, taking them as benefit of the doubt, they've essentially said they want to think more holistically about what policies should be and what policies should fall from this document versus listing specific actions, specific installations to make.
Yeah. Also the other thing so thanks for articulating that. The other thing that kind of came to my mind here is just, how much of this is up to DDOT. I mean, it's great that we put the pressure on it, but if DDOT's writing a document and they call out specific things, but they can't implement it, then you got to think to yourself, well, they're probably not the ones calling the shots.
Yes. And that's probably why they moved away from specific projects. So I think that all we can do is hold them to the fire on the commitments they are willing to make. And I think we need to ask them to make more specific commitments, and those specific commitments might not be specific projects, but they could be metrics, right? So for example, they noted, I skipped this one, they said we will implement by the end of FY25 25 lane miles of dedicated bus lanes, but then they just end there. And again, this strategy document is supposed to be a 25-year strategy document. Now, they obviously updated it 6 years after the last 25-year strategy document, and obviously things change, and I'm sure that the next move DC will take place prior to 25 years from now. But as DDOT says that they will continue to build bicycle facilities, they should also commit to continuing to build dedicated bus lanes. And so that's why I noted that 5 additional, right? I sort of know how many bus lanes there are, how many bus lanes there want to be, how many streets there are, and can say, okay, 5 lane miles a year, that sounds reasonable, since you're implementing, you can implement 5 miles of bicycle facility every year. You've clearly said that this is a reasonable amount. And I'll also note that the priority bus network is smaller than the priority bike network. So, frankly, if they did 5 miles a year, they could complete that network if they were to cover that entire priority network in bus lanes. They could complete that network in a handful of years.
Yeah. Maybe one other goal would be to reduce the number of years. Like 25 years seems.
No, sorry, it's by fiscal 2025.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
No, it's 20 to 25 miles by fiscal year 2025, not 25 years from now.
Okay, no, but a 25-year vision, is that the way?
Oh, yeah.
That's like, come on, right? What is that? Like, what is that time period? This is worse than cicadas.
No, I mean, Again, and I'll note, and I put this in right. So this is a 25-year plan, but most of these strategies are in the 1 to 5 year time frame. Right, there are some things that are listed as 5+ years, but for the most part, right, the 25 years is we are thinking about, or hopefully we're thinking about what we want our transportation network and to look like 25 years from now. I think that's what a strategic 25-year plan is.
It just seems like, I mean, I'm sure you can, I'm sure like you get what I'm saying when, you know,
Yeah.
when you have like 10-year plan would probably be, you know, more fitting. And even then somebody could make the argument that maybe that's not appropriate, but you know, we didn't have Ubers, we didn't have scooters, we didn't have electric bikes everywhere. I mean, who knows in 25 years?
Yeah, in 25 years, we'll probably have flying cars and we won't have to worry about parking. But right, look, I think it's good to look that far forward. But remembering the last Move DC plan was 6 years ago. So I do doubt that that this plan will still be as it is 25 years from now. But it's helpful to look forward to what we want the roads to be like. I don't know. I mean, I guess they've put out this vision for Move DC. I don't think they're looking to shorten the timeline of it, if you will.
Yeah, it just comes off to me as like a way of like punting down the road, like give you a way out of it. Oh yeah, well this is a 25-year document, you know, we're around to that.
Well, right, and that's why I think we say that holding them to annual reporting and annual metrics are key.
I like it. So great, I love the resolution. Thank you for doing all the work and you know, some polishing that we went through tonight, and you know, it was a very thorough analysis, and I appreciated it. I think seems like you've done a service for ANC 1C, and we'll all get this out.
Thanks. It was more work than I thought it was going to be, but I got to learn a lot.
Yeah, when I opened it up and I saw all the resolve clauses, it's like, oh, that's a ton of resolve clauses. Like, this is gonna be okay. No, but great.
Yeah, no, and that's the important thing is, you know, again, we want, and I think the Move DC wants their plan to be listened to by DDOT, and they have, you know, I have attended a large number of meetings. I've attended a large number of virtual meetings. I've attended a large number of DDOT meetings. I have never seen a more engaging group than the Move DC group. And I really give them a lot of credit for their outreach, not just to commissioners, but to communities, and not just to communities in Ward 1, but communities across the river as well. And they are definitely keen for us to help them improve this plan. And so I think I felt that the more resolve clauses we could add, you know, again, it's as if we were writing a letter, and each resolve clause is an individual comment. But I know that we have a number of the commissioners are on the line as well, and they've been listening patiently. So if anyone else has any comments before we vote on this, I would be very happy to hear them. Or any of the attendees as well. Okay, nothing heard. I know that we went through a lot today, and so for the commissioners, you know, when you have the chance to digest this, that would be awesome, and I'm looking forward to this. Thank you, Kristen, for sharing this with the Transportation Committee of the bid. And I look forward to us finalizing some of that language as discussed, and passing this and getting it to Move DC before their June 11th deadline. So with that, I guess let's have a second for a vote.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of I guess all in favor of this resolution, say aye.
I,
Aye. Any opposed? So unanimously, this resolution will be put before the full ANC next month. And thank you guys for walking through this with me and for putting up with my typos as I had my post-vaccine fever.
well, glad you're fully vaccinated, and this is the committee process, so we're making full use of it.
Thank you for all your work on that. That's a lot.
Well, you're welcome. And again, I was happy to do the work. It made sense for this committee and for me personally. I focused on the issues that I thought we should focus on. So if any of the committee members or if any of the commission members have other thoughts about Move DC, things that I left off, feel free to let me know and we can discuss them and amend this next month. But for now, let's move on. Commissioner Bowles there? We have this letter before us that is ANC budget priorities for fiscal year 2022. Just for transparency's sake, the agenda notes the difference of this in that we're going to discuss this letter. Given that we put this on our agenda after the 10-day public notice, we will vote to whether to put the letter on the full ANC agenda, but we will not be giving a recommendation because there wasn't a proper notice for that. But that vote obviously means something since it gets it onto the agenda. Commissioner Bowles.
Yeah, thank you so much. So a lot of this is just a repeat, honestly, of Move DC and voicing our frustrations, but instead of submitting a survey, we're actually getting funding to make the infrastructure in Adams Morgan better. So as many folks know, it is budget season for the DC Council. The mayor will be presenting her budget publicly, I believe the 27th, 26th, or 22nd. I feel like it's one of those days. Either way, it's after, it's before our June meeting. And so with that, we will see all of the things that she's interested in funding. The things that I have listed here in this resolution, I have things that are in blue and things that are in purple. Blue are things that I would like this committee to discuss and better vet. And then purple are things that the Public Services and Environment Committee should better vet. Of course, there's some crossover between those things, but overall, this committee focuses obviously planning, zoning, and transportation. And that includes a pedestrian zone and to fund a DDOT bus priority program and a protected bike lane on Columbia Road. That also includes allocating funding for Unity Park resurfacing, as well as allocating funding for the Columbia Road and 18th Street Plaza area, and looking at other areas where we can make investments to better make Adams Morgan look at the OP Vision Framework Plan. I don't know if there's funding that's needed or required, but the Ann Hargrove Park has been talked about of receiving funding. I think we should include it in this year's go around to see if there's any more funding. And if not, we can continue to at least put pressure on getting that park completed for the renovations. Additionally, adding more people to work at DDOT, particularly in DDOT's Transportation Engineering and Safety Division and Planning and Sustainability Divisions. And then in addition to support and schedule the Capital Trails Coalition Plan Trail expansion. Which the Rock Creek Park and the Suitland Park Parkway Trail Network rehabilitation and construction of the Piney Branch Parkway, as well as MBT. And then of something, of course, that we just top of the line, fully fund Vision Zero. So those are the things that I bring to this committee. I'm definitely down to add more to this. The reason why I think it makes sense for us to do this, I don't believe we've done something. I know we've asked for renovations and like one-time projects from the ANC, but putting this all in one place is really helpful for our leaders to see like what we want and what we will continue to prioritize in this next fiscal year. So does anyone have any questions about anything? I really don't want to take up too much time considering the very thorough conversation we had previously.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowles, and that's a shame because I would like to take up a lot of time.
Over a beer maybe, Zach.
So I have I guess a couple questions. One, I guess the challenge that with the challenging position that we're in, right, is that we have no idea, don't know what is in the mayor's budget yet. We don't know what the mayor's budget is going to look like. I can guarantee that a number of these issues certainly won't be in the budget. But like, for example, I believe that the Rock Creek Park Trail rehabilitation is a funded project. I don't know do you have a different understanding of that?
So that was actually pulled from, and a lot of these are pulled from other coalitions and or council members. And that one was pulled directly from Councilmember Nadeau's letter.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know the dates of implementation for construction for that trail.
It's already started.
Yeah, I'm not super, I don't. Yeah.
I mean, I would say two things. One is, three things. One, as someone who has attempted to bicycle on Suitland Parkway Trail and who thinks that that is an excellent access way and is an absolute mess of a trail, I 100% think that should be funded. And it should have happened. I believe there's been funding for it to happen a long time ago. That's a whole other issue. I appreciate us writing into I think this letter needs to include two things. Is one, it is our priorities in the sense of this is what we want funded if it's not currently in the budget, but also this is what we want funded and not taken away from the budget. And I think that a challenge in a letter like this without knowing what the budget looks like, right, is the budget is going to be a balanced budget of spending all the money that the district thinks it's going to have. And so in order to request things that are not in the budget, not knowing what those things are, monies are going to have to be taken from somewhere else that I guess we prioritize less. And I guess it is hard to send a letter saying these are all our priorities and not mentioning these are what are not our priorities, right? So for example, fully funding Vision Zero, and I think that should be listed out as fully funding for fiscal year 21, the Vision Zero Enhancement Omnibus Amendment Act of 2020, because Vision Zero itself is a concept, right? There's an actual law that should be funded, the Vision Zero Act. But according to I think it was the auditors or comptroller, it's going to be $47 million to fund that this coming fiscal year. Sorry, FY 2022. So I agree that it's a priority to fund that, but that means that $47 million comes from somewhere else. And I know that you've looked at a lot of these coalition letters, and so you sort of, I'm certain that you have a better sense of the budget than I do. Commissioner Bowles, but it's sort of like where does that 47 million come from? And that's just one of our many priorities. I don't know
Yeah,
if you have
so
thoughts on that, or if
I-
other commissioners have thoughts.
Yeah, I definitely can help answer that. So actually, we do offer options on how to fund numerous of these programs. In the last, therefore, we suggest obviously using all federal funds. DC is going to leave money on the table. We don't want them to do that, and we want them to partner with people to make sure that that doesn't happen. Raising revenue, we didn't specify what that means, but there's a lot of folks talking about how to raise revenue so we have more monies. And then the other thing, oh no, we did, sorry, including taxing the district's highest earners. And then additionally is continuing to redirect funds from Metropolitan PD. So those definitely are like good routes. Those are routes that coalitions are asking to fund things, as well as council members. I also don't think for us we necessarily have to say like what not to prioritize. I mean, it just does. I mean, I could honestly come up with a lot of things that I don't want our government to pay for. So I mean, I'm happy to add that to this. This is just something, not a lot of coalitions, I feel like, don't fund this. They mostly say, do fund this. And in terms of like the timeline, now's the timeline. It's perfectly fine to submit this now. We will know more about what the budget looks like. And if the mayor funds some of these things, we can say, I think the therefore clause says something like, request that DC Council pass, and we could put the mayor sign a budget with the previously referenced. So the budget process, even if she submits it, this therefore clause says that we don't really care if she submits it, if DC submits it, if whoever council member submits any of these things, we don't really care. We just want the DC Council to pass it and for the mayor to sign this. So I don't know if that helps. Probably has more questions. And then in regarding the Vision Zero, there's a section at the bottom of legislative priorities. If you wanted to add the fully fund and then add the 2018 or 19 name of it, obviously that's completely fine. There's numerous other legislative priorities that are already doing that. So we can put it in the same spot and just call it its actual name. I will also say that I don't want to get too long on this. The council member submitted a 2-page letter. Council member Nadeau did. So us getting much longer than that seems a little outside of our bounds. But again, this is just, we don't write the budget. We don't fund the budget. This is purely messaging and purely saying to the executive and the legislature that, hey, these are things that our constituents want and that we will continue to advocate for this year and for next year. And if things get funded, we seek to have collaboration to make things work for our neighborhood, specifically the infrastructure and business sections, whereas the housing, education, and legislative priorities are more district-wide things.
No, I thank you, Commissioner. I think that's great. And I think it's definitely helpful where we have picked out priorities that either our council member or other council members are already championing, because that means that whether or not they're in the mayor's budget, there's already a voice on the council that has the opportunity to amend the council's budget in some way, and allows us, especially for Councilmember Nadeau, to say that we are an ANC in your ward and we support this priority, or we double down on some priority that she has.
And everything that's on this list is supported from at least one council member, except for the very, very hyper-local issues in which I believe we can continue just have a conversation with our council member Nadeau to talk about those, specifically the Ann Hargrove Park, Unity Park resurfacing, as well as the plaza area at Columbia and 18th Street. Those are, and then the pedestrian zone. I don't know necessarily what financial, like the real cost for these things are, but luckily she has a full staff and they have an entire budget office to find out. So her, to that point as well, like, we don't necessarily even need to have the numbers. Her team will have the numbers, and especially because her or another council member has sponsored or will be carrying the water for most of these requests.
So thanks for that. And I would, an area, I guess, on that first pedestrian zone open streets funding, I would, one, remove the term open streets, and two, specifically mention the blocks of 2,400 and 2,300 blocks of 18th Street as that pedestrian zone. So open streets, especially to this administration, is a one-day festival in which a street is closed. We're not looking for money to have a one-time festival. We're looking for a weekendly, if not more, pedestrian zone. And so I think that, yes, using that language of pedestrian zone versus using a language of open streets, I know what you mean, and you know what and like everyone here knows what you mean. But I think we just want to be careful not to use the term open streets, because in the Wilson building, it means something very different. Other commissioners?
Yeah, I agree with the calling out the 23 and 2,400 blocks, because we don't want it to be shorter. We don't want it to be just the 2,400 block or between Columbia and Belmont or anything like that.
That's a great point. Commissioner Faulkner, any thoughts?
I don't think I have anything additional. I was going to just echo what Commissioner Bowles said and just say that I think, some of the benefit of doing this letter is, for example, if the mayor's budget comes out and, some of this is likely to be in there, some of it's not, it sort of gives, for the neighborhood specific things, hopefully it gives Councilmember Nadeau additional, motivation and sort of ammunition to use in negotiating to get some of these things funded, and also hopefully sends a signal to the full council about some of the other legislative priorities that maybe are on the fence. Like, for example, the Vision Zero. I think the Vision Zero legislation, it sounds like the mayor is probably not expected to include that funding, but a lot of council members have said they would support it. And so I think just anything we can give, for in support of those priorities that are maybe, or even just, any portion of Vision Zero, the Vision Zero Act funding would be great. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Commissioner. The other thing I would note, and this is sort of in some ways it's a disagreement between between our ANC, or at least with our ANC as currently stated, and the council member's office. In my estimation of the right of way of Columbia Road, there can be a bus lanes, there can be protected bike lanes, there can't be both, or it would be very difficult to have both. And so I recognize that the council member in her budget wish list has talked about a bus and bike lane on Columbia Road, but I would like us to continue to call for the funding of a protected bike lane on Columbia Road. I 100% DDOT should continue, should get more funding for bus priority program, as we highlighted in the previous conversation about Move DC. They should be fully carrying that out. But I want to see the prioritization and design of a protected bike infrastructure on Columbia Road. And if DDOT wants to come to me and show me how they can fit both bike lanes and bus lanes on Columbia Road, I am all ears. And I would be keen for that. But
So not
I
to
guess I don't.
interject, but aren't they actually doing that like next month or July? Aren't they able to produce plans for the Columbia Road study?
If you're aware of that, that's not something I'm aware of. So I would love to
I
touch
mean,
base.
I don't know the plans. I just like I don't want to take out the transit priority. It means a lot to me and my constituents and 18th Street businesses. But at least until we know what's even going to happen, like I at least want to give the people who are the engineers like the opportunity to do both. I mean, like you said, do I think it's going to be both? I'm hoping. that's what I'm hoping for. And the council member has made public that she wants both. And I don't know. I hear what you're saying, like realistic hat on, Commissioner Gold. I totally hear that. But I know this might come off weird, but budget letters are also kind of wish listy. I don't know how to else say that, but add everything you want. This is our first like not necessarily bargaining chip, but we are giving more credence to allow our council member to bargain more with. So if we're not able to get transit or protected for both, at least we're going to be able to get one. Whereas I feel like if we just did one, maybe we're just going to get a repaint of this bike lane. That's just my thought.
Other commissioners have thoughts on that? Commissioner Wood.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I mean, this is just my opinion speaking, but I mean, it seems like, I'll be very brief. It seems a lot easier to basically support things that are already in motion in terms of budget support as opposed to reversing course. I don't know if that's kind of maybe a tangent, but I think that, our strong point here as an ANC and any ANC in the city isn't to try to go and say, oh, this is the things that we really want done, regardless of what everyone else thinks. We can do that, but I think we'll find more success basically pushing Brianna Doe, who's our council member, and maybe some at-large people to say, we already support this is what's going on. Here's an additional voice for you to be able to justify pushing that on the rest of the council. So yeah, just a thought.
Sure. Is that in reference to having a bus lane and a bike lane, or in reference to her priority for a bus bike lane? I
guess the earlier thoughts just about like potentially expanding what we're doing here. I don't know if it's worth it. Not to say that we can't do it, but it's just like, it might be a misallocation of resource, or it might have just been mishearing too. So if that's the case, I really am sorry.
So I guess Commissioner Bowles, how would you feel about moving from the first bullet, the first phrase of that first bullet being one bullet, and then prioritize the design and construction of transit priority and protected bike lane infrastructure on Columbia Road as a separate bullet? I think that way, right, it gets to the same point, and I think we all prioritize bus priority broadly across the city, and I know that I'm psyched. Well, one, I know that my constituents are psyched for the construction to be done on 16th Street, but definitely, I don't. That's not what I meant for a bus priority program on Columbia Road, but continued funding for a bus priority program in general. Because I'm not aware of a bus priority program on Columbia Road at this point.
Yeah, now that sentence looks weird. Okay.
Side note for Unity Park, Wasn't that part of the Line Hotel when that was constructed? Wasn't that paid for? That existing surface was paid for.
Yeah, so they
by-
made the initial installation. The warranty is up on maintenance, and now we're trying to get DGS and or DPR to help with the funding of that. There was a quote, it was about 85,000 to redo that area. And this is, I believe, just something that the council member wants to know so she can find money in the capital budget to redo this. But yeah, it was a private public partnership when they redid Unity Park a few years ago, but now it's purely public maintenance.
So whatever they installed fell apart, and now it's up to taxpayer money.
Yep, it's not good. There's giant.
It lasted exactly until the warranty. Like any good product.
Could you, Zach, could you please just, or Commissioner Gold, could you just add in the comments or do the strike through of whatever you?
Yeah, so I think I just wanted to see these as two different, right, so we want them to continue to fund the bus priority program. But I see that as separate as whatever they're planning to do on Columbia Road.
And honestly, that may have been what, this was also a piece that was taken from the council member's letter. So this also could be maybe just honestly a grammatical error.
And the way that, like, having it two separate things as well, right?
Now, yeah,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I was gonna say it reads well now.
Yeah, and obviously the Columbia Road study request that you cite is all about the bike lane. So I think it makes sense having it separated like this. Let me recommend this change.
Are there any other questions about these line items?
I'd also like to add something for Carolyn Laurenti Park. We walked through it, has beautiful blooms, beautiful roses, but is otherwise all dirt and dust.
Yeah, let's add it. Is that the one across from 7-Eleven?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, let's definitely add it. If you could add, I don't even, what's the name of the park? Reed Cook neighborhood over here.
Where, so that should be an infrastructure after the blue text here in the purple.
We can just add it, like allocate funding for the completion of renovations of Ann Hargrove, just right after that, considering it's right across the street.
Yeah, for the renovation.
So Commissioner Bowles, you'll see that I just added where you wrote fully fund Vision Zero, I simply just wrote fully fund the law. Because again, Vision
great.
Zero. So if that works for you, I can just implement it.
Yeah, let's do it. Oh, I think I just deleted it on accident.
All right, I'll do it this time. Oh, there.
Sorry.
No problem. Work by committee. I would love to fully fund Vision Zero. Just everyone moves through life in a bubble.
Very much so. But yeah, are there any other questions or any other particularly capital projects? I mean, we're not looking for millions and millions, but in the thousands. From what I know of the budget, there will be capital funds, and they are looking to do renovations and are looking to do maintenance and repair for public spaces.
So if that's the case, and I'm glad you brought that to attention, right? On our walk both with the core team and with DDOT. And of course, as residents of this neighborhood, we know how bombed out Columbia Road is throughout the jurisdiction, right? If we, if we're asking for funding for redesigning the infrastructure and construction of the infrastructure, I think we should be asking as well for them to be repaving the road from end to end.
So we can definitely.
Or that's one thing. Certainly, that's one thing we can mention.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely down for that too. I haven't looked at Pave DC to see when Columbia Road is on the next cycle. I can't imagine it not being soon, considering how terrible the road condition is. But yeah, let's add it. I mean,
so does Pave DC show future? At least from my navigation of the site, they show like what is planned for the year. But in terms of future years, I'm unfamiliar with how that's determined, and two, if there is a schedule. So if you like, if you have more experience with that site and with the department, so if there's if you can point me to where there's a schedule.
Let's add it. The website
is
terrible.
Let's add it.
It's so bad. They do have a plan to the mayor is committed to eliminating all poor quality roads in the district by 2024. So, it's on the list. It's got to be, right?
It should be, because it's a poor quality road.
Okay, it's not on the list.
Yeah, so I know that they show like this year's list.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's construction on the 1600 block now, but that will be done soon, and there'll be a nice new building that could use a nice new street in front of it. Commissioner Boots isn't here to advocate for his SMD, so I will.
Yeah, I'm happy to add that. I don't know if someone added it. I'm on the DDOT paving plan, and it's just, yeah, okay. Get me off of here. Did you add that line?
No, if you want to, wherever you think it's appropriate.
I mean, honestly, let's put it right here, I guess. There's probably more of an eloquent way of saying this. Do we want to do like the Adams Mill, Connecticut type of thing, or just do straight Connecticut?
Where are you typing? Okay. Fund repave of Columbia Road, yeah, from 16th Street to Connecticut, or I think technically it's California, but they'll know what we mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that the Silva is redoing the sidewalk.
Well,
there. I don't know. I'm not sure who is asking about the Triangle Park at Quarry and Harvard. That is a fun time. I'm trying to get anyone to, you know what, if anyone has a lawnmower, I'll give you $20 to go and mow that. Because DPW, Parks, and DGS are passing the buck to each other. Okay. Cool.
So I'm just reading the chat. Thanks, Kristen, for a lot of the background.
Sorry, Nick, that is for the concept design for the Triangle Park on Harvard. Yes, okay, then yes, if there's a concept design, we may as well ask for it to be funded. That's what designs are for.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, that's not even
So the
recode.
technical name is Triangle Park. And it is the Triangle Park on 1800 Harvard Street.
And are folks adding that?
I'll do that.
But I mean, I will say we don't get anything. We get 100% of nothing for the things we don't ask for. So like, I think it's good that we're asking for all the things, and we will now have, you know, a resolution to point back to and say, hey, we asked for this, you know, in May and June of 2021. You know, it's FY22 now. Like, how do we get this together? Of course, like in the future, especially if things are funded. But if there's no
part in there, the erosion and, you know, the improvements that are needed.
and that's in the Colorama Park.
That is in there.
No, I was saying you were discussing the erosion in Colorama Park.
Yeah, the erosion among the other improvements that are needed in Colorado Park. Is this something that we should be discussing here? I mean, that's one of the most used parks in the district.
Yeah, I definitely think we can either today or next week in the Public Services and Environment Committee.
Yeah. Just a suggestion then. Let's
but we're already and the reason why I say that one next week is because that one is, I feel like, a little bit more tricky than these other parks, right? Or do you think we could just say allocate funding and repair?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could add a line to it and then probably, you know, spend 30 minutes talking about it or 15 minutes talking about it at PSE.
Yeah, totally.
The appropriate forum.
I will make that sound better. Okay, fine. Okay.
But just in case it hasn't been said already at least once, thank you, Commissioner Bowles, and the other commissioners who worked with you on this for bringing this to us tonight.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
And I mean, this is helpful. And I love the way you linked to things where possible, because there's a lot of information here. I mean, it may be one line, but it's a lot of information.
Totally. And there's a few more things that I need to add links to. I want to continue to add more to the council member letters. I don't know if that's necessarily needed, but I used it as like a good guide.
Yeah, I was just following that. So the links below are sort of where the council members have listed their own wish lists.
I can continue to add to those. I wasn't able to find those three as quickly as I wanted to, but I can definitely add them or just nix this whole side. It really was just more to create this letter in general.
Okay, are there other thoughts from commissioners or members of the community?
You know, the one thing I'll say I'd like to take out is the parts at the end saying about how to get that money, whether it's raising revenue by taxing or redirecting funds. I just, I love that we're talking about what's a priority for us. The fact that we didn't go down the path of saying, what we should prioritize and what we shouldn't prioritize. I think in that same spirit, we shouldn't be opining on how to raise the revenue or where to redirect the funds from. So it's my 2 cents.
I think it, so I know that I would like to leave them in there because I do, this is still messaging. And in terms of, there will be federal money, but in order to have some, especially these like housing and education and other legislative priorities, there's going to need more than just one-time investment, which is what the feds are allowing us to do, or is what the feds are giving us now, which allows us to add to this like capital project wish list. But adding recurring funds by raising revenue or by continuing to redirect funds from NPD really does allow us to fight and prioritize and fund some of these other larger programs. So in that battle, being able to show to the 7 council members that are hopefully looking to come up with a proposal to fund all of these other things that are in our letter, they're going to likely have an amendment raising revenue on the district's highest income earners. And I would like to be able to have them point to us and the other ANCs that are doing something very similar and say, hey, our constituents, especially ones that can afford it, and we are in one of the wealthier ANCs, they're fine with getting taxed more if they're able to get these programs. So I don't want to be as specific as like, including the taxes of the district's highest income earners and define what that income earner is. We could, or there's other ANCs that are not asking for redirective funds for MPD, but are asking for like complete dismantlement of MPD. Some of the letters from other ANCs, I'm like, all right, they are really coming hard for a lot of these agencies. So I totally hear that. I just see it differently.
Yeah. Zach, go ahead. And then,
I think there's something to be said for recognizing that sacrifices and choices and decisions need to be made. I tend to, so I am very in favor of recognizing that we're just not asking for the world. I think that there is especially where we don't know at this juncture what the budget is going to look like. I think that recommending specific remedies to those decisions and sacrifices makes a little less sense. I think that it's fine to recommend, from my perspective, it's fine to recommend raising revenue because, raising revenue, but I think we could remove including taxing high income earners, right? There are other ways to raise revenue that we could recommend. For example, charging more for parking is another way to raise revenue. Just to go back to the move DC discussion. So I think that we can mention that this council should use available tools, including raising revenue. We might not need to recommend how that revenue will be raised. Similarly, I think that we should acknowledge the redirecting funds from other budget areas, because in order to pay for some things, we're probably going to have to redirect funds from other budget areas. But I think that that specifying redirecting funds from MPD, right? There are many things from which we could redirect funds. I think that again, I would rather at this juncture not get into the specifics of from where we're redirecting funds, and leave that up to the council to think about.
So yeah, and I think that is aligned with the way we were approaching the document as a wish list, as the things that are important to us and that we should be asking for. We don't spend a bunch of time thinking about, well, where's that money coming from? Because we could spend a whole lot of time thinking about that. That could be a totally different resolution. So I'd rather this be the wish list.
And I would say that my wish list is to have those that make the highest income pay their fair share in taxes instead of trying to find additional tax revenue, like increasing the cost for parking. Is that something I would like individually? Hell yes, absolutely. But the easiest, biggest target right now is requiring those who make the most to pay their fair share. And again, this is a messaging bill. We don't have any authority over any of these funds. We're really just trying to give, the folks who do make these choices, more leverage. And I think that based on the at-large district things that are in this letter, the extra money can and probably should come from that specific group.
Commissioner Faulkner, can I put you on the spot for any thoughts?
I mean, I think I'm supportive of keeping some language in there. I think, I don't know, I guess I think it makes sense to maybe have the full commission, help consider and make that decision rather than, I know PSE will be considering this next week. I personally think that, while it is getting more specific, I think we do kind of know that, last budget season, the council, tried to raise revenue by taxing, higher earners, and it failed. And I think several council members have already talked about that being a thing that they expect to try to do again. So I don't think it's not as if I think we're suggesting something that isn't likely to be on the table. And so I think similarly, we're signaling we have these priorities and this is likely, a way they may want to do that, and we support that. And similarly with the MPD funding. So I don't think we're not throwing something that isn't already potentially on the table. And I think I for example, there are lots of programs that could be redirected funding for, but I think I don't want them to redirect funding from schools to pay for bike lanes, for example. So for that reason, I think it maybe makes sense to include that. But I also I think the whole commission should probably discuss that.
Thank you. That was that was more articulate than I expected, given that I put you on the spot, Commissioner Faulkner. So thanks for being very thoughtful with that. I think, again, two of the members of this committee have sort of voiced skepticism of that language. But at the same time, we're sort of just voting on whether or not to put this on the agenda for next month. So while I am happy for us to add things to the list, I don't want to remove items without them having the full consideration either of the commission or of the community. I think that's where I want that to be. And so I am certain that in June we will readdress the questioning of this last paragraph. But I am of the mind that we should leave it there for now. Unless Commissioner Arani, you strenuously oppose that.
No, let's leave it and we can discuss it at the full commission, because we are not voting to recommend it, but we are voting to place it on the agenda. So I agree with that sentiment. I'll just note that, we did go through this as a wish list and I'm completely on board with that. However, I do think that those last two lines they could be their own resolution. how you intend to raise revenue. And I think we did have a resolution about redirecting funds from MPD last year. And those are can be a completely separate resolution. So it's like opening up a whole new can of worms with, what looks like one sentence. But yeah, let's place it on the agenda.
Great. Let's then vote. Do we need a second to have a vote that is not a vote of approval?
Who
knows that?
Yeah.
Can I have a second to vote for this?
I say.
No harm, no
No
foul.
harm in it. Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor of placing this without recommendation on the ANC agenda for, sorry, backwards. So given that this letter, Commissioner Bowles, has both PSE and PZT items, is there a particular placement that you would want it to be on the monthly agenda? Like, should this be under the PZT agenda or should it be under PSE? Do you have a preference?
I have no preference, and I don't necessarily know if there even needs to be a vote on this tonight. It was added as discussion, and there's definitely more than 10 days notice for the June meeting. So I don't care. It's your guys' committee vote. Yay, do what you want.
All right, so simply because I think we go first, and therefore it'll be higher up in the agenda and there'll be more people paying attention. That's how that works, right? All in favor of putting this on the PZT agenda without recommendation for the June meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Here unanimity. This will be on the agenda for PZT.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowles. This was really good. And with that, I call this meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone, for a great discussion. It was a real meeting of the committee and of the commission in action and in public view. So thank you all for being here. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks.